Hey guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. Happy Friday. Are you guys ready for the weekend? Okay, so I brought the Melody Beatty book with me today, The Language of Letting Go. I will say that in the last couple videos that I've done over here, I've gotten a few comments from people that have left me suggestions for things that you guys would like me to talk about on video. So I'm keeping a list of that. I have a couple different things that I'm going to talk about. I have a video that I want to do about being in love with an alcoholic or an addict, or vice versa, being in love with what in recovery we call as a normie, because I think everybody knows that I'm married to somebody that's not in recovery. So I got a question about that. I also got a couple different questions about friendship, about how to maneuver friendships, how to set boundaries and limits in friendships, how to look for friends, things like that. So I'm going to do a couple different videos about friends, making friends, keeping friends, working on friendships. I think we talk about relationships and relationship counseling and stuff, but like friendships, I think, are so important in our lives, you know, and it's the idea of how do we keep healthy relationships with our friends? How do we set boundaries and limits with our friends and things like that? I've had a couple of you that have reached out to me that have given me some very specific stories. And then a couple people asked me about grief and recovery. So I have, I don't know, 5 or 6 different topics that I have written down and kind of started to outline that I want to talk about over here. But today, so if you have any suggestions for videos that you guys want me to make, please put it in the comment section below, and I will make those videos probably in the upcoming week. But today I wanted to start the weekend on a meditation. So I brought the Melody Beatty book with me, Language of Letting Go, which is the sister book to Codependent No More, which is probably one of my favorite. Both of these are, Codependent No More and The Language of Letting Go, are probably 2 of my favorite books of my entire life. So let's go to October 11th and see what it says today. October 11th. Bum, bum, bum. Recovery, it's about. Let's see what yesterday was about and the day before. Yesterday was about payoffs from destructive relationships. Oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about that. Let's read that one. Payoffs from destructive relationships, since a lot of people ask me about friendships and relationships and things like that. October 10th, payoffs from destructive relationships. Sometimes it helps to understand that we may be receiving a payoff from relationships that cause us distress. The relationship may be feeding into our helplessness or our martyr role. Maybe the relationship feeds our need to be needed, enhancing our self-esteem by allowing us to feel in control or morally superior to the other person. Some of us feel alleviated from financial or other kinds of responsibility by staying in a particular relationship. My father abused me when I was a child, said one woman. I went on to spend the next 20 years blackmailing him emotionally and financially on this. I could get money from him whenever I wanted, and I never had to take financial responsibility for myself. Realizing that we may have gotten a codependent payoff from a relationship is not a cause for shame. It means we are searching out the blocks in ourselves that may be stopping our growth. We can take responsibility for the part we may have played in keeping ourselves victimized. When we are willing to look honestly and fearlessly at the payoff and let it go, we will find the healing we've been seeking. We'll also be ready to receive the positive, healthy payoffs available in relationships, the payoffs we really want and need. Today, I will be open to looking at the payoffs I may have received from staying in unhealthy relationships or from keeping destructive systems operating. I will become ready to let go of my need to stay in unhealthy systems. I am ready to face myself. Wow, a really powerful meditation, and one that I think, depending on where you're at in your healing journey, I think can kind of have polarizing points of view, because I can tell you that at different points of my healing journey, I felt very differently about different things to do with, not necessarily, I mean, at times I didn't even have choices to stay, you know, in destructive relationships. But I think it's an interesting question of what do we get out of it? I mean, when you talk about like friendships, right? Well, I was talking about friendships earlier. When you're in a friendship that is not healthy for you, and you know it's not healthy for you, you know, what is the payoff for you? The payoff could be as easy as being fearful to have the conversation and just leave the friendship. I think that when we're in unhealthy relationships at times, I think I have stayed in the past in unhealthy relationships out of fear of being alone. I just didn't want to be alone, you know? And so I was afraid to move forward. You know, I think that my last relationship, I think he would define it the same way. I mean, it's been so long now. It's been, you know, 17, 18, almost 18 years. But that, I wouldn't say it was a destructive relationship, but it was an unhealthy relationship. We were, neither one of us, like, wanting to be together, and we weren't doing the work to stay in it. I think both of us, well, I guess I should probably just speak for myself. I think I stayed in it because I couldn't really imagine a world where he wasn't my boyfriend, where he wasn't my partner. I couldn't imagine a world coming home where he wasn't like waiting for me or I was waiting for him when he came home. I just couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine, even though there was no passion in the relationship and there was just like, I mean, we loved each other. We were, you know, both cared about each other. I think at that point, though, we would both probably have admitted that we weren't in love with each other, romantically, intimately in love with each other. But we loved each other. We cared about each other. I still care about him, you know? And I still think he's a fantastic person. I just don't think the relationship was healthy for us. We weren't really bound to each other financially. It's been really, really important for me because I think I grew up in an era where, you know, my mom was like one of the first of many of her female friends to get divorced. And so as I grew older, I would hear from like my mom telling me about her friends, or her friends I would overhear them talking about how they would leave a marriage and then they were just screwed financially. They just were really, you know, like they had to start over from scratch, basically. And so I think that it was kind of just really like driven into me by both of my parents to always be financially independent. And so in every relationship, I think that's been something, I haven't always made the greatest choices with that, but I will say that that's been something that's been really important for me. So I can't speak to staying in a relationship for financial reasons. I've had friends of mine do that. I've had friends of mine that have said to me, I know this is not healthy. I know I need to get out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't had a job in 30 years except for raising kids. Like, what am I going to do tomorrow? You know, even if I get the house, I don't know that I can afford to pay for the utilities and things like that. Like, I'm not going to be left with a lot, you know? And I do know friends of mine that have stayed in situations for that. I've had friends of mine that have stayed in marriages and relationships because of the kids. They'll say, we're staying in it because of the kids. I think a sad sentiment to that is that, you know, kids typically can sense when there's stuff going on. I mean, I can remember friends of mine in high school being like, my parents just stay together for us, like, and we all know that, and it's a joke. And then, you know, after everybody graduates from high school, the parents get divorced and go their separate ways, and the kids are like, why did we knew you guys didn't like each other. Why did you stay together? All I can speak to is my experience. I know that in both of my last two relationships that I was in, that I knew that it was unhealthy, and I think they knew that it was unhealthy, but neither one of us was willing to do anything to get out of it, to move forward in it. And I can remember with my first boyfriend, he was basically the one that initiated it. He was like, I'm not happy in it anymore. I'm not in love with you and whatever. But he didn't say anything about wanting to break up necessarily. It wasn't like that's not how the conversation started. I can remember being there and being like, all the air just felt like it left the room. I can remember coming like immediately over to my mom's house and talking to her and stuff like that. And she asked me, you know, she's like, is there, you know, should you guys work on it? And we had been together at that point 4.5 years. And she was like, do you think you guys should work on it? Like, whatever. And I just didn't feel like there was anything left to work on. Weirdly enough, and I always remember this, we had taken a trip with my dad and my stepmom somewhere. We were on some like island or beach area. And I can remember like sitting on the beach, and he was like, he had asked me if I wanted to go like on a walk or something like that. And I was like, no. And so I was like reading a book or a magazine, and I can remember like watching him like on the water's edge, and then like putting my book in front of it and being like, okay, this is what my life would be like if I wasn't with him. It was almost kind of like I wished for it, kind of. And then it happened, and when it happened, I was like, we're not in love with each other. I knew it. Even before he said it to me, I knew that we weren't in love with each other anymore. I didn't want to be with him. He didn't want to be with me, but we were staying out with each other for security. You know, we had become best friends. We did everything together. And that's really what happened in my second relationship. I recreated that again. In my second relationship, I don't think that the reasons that we stayed together, I don't think the reasons I stayed in either one of those relationships was other than maybe fear of not having that person in my life anymore, and also fear of being alone. I think that's probably one of the things that I didn't even really get until me and my second boyfriend broke up. And I always, in my relationships, I mean, I've had many boyfriends before I got sober, but those are the two that I had before I got sober, and then I met Alex. But, you know, I can, and the ones when I was like actively using were just, I mean, I had many boyfriends and they were none of them, none of us, I wasn't healthy, they weren't healthy, we weren't healthy together. But I can, you know, I think with my ex, you know, one of the things that I realized was that we were staying together because the second that we broke up, like, I did not know him anymore. I mean, I literally can see myself standing in the apartment when the whole conversation happened. And it was like 1 second, we were like bonded, we went everywhere, we mean, we were so enmeshed. We did, and it was to a point of being unhealthy. I mean, we did everything together. It's why it's important for me in my relationship that I have my independence and my husband has his. We were so enmeshed that we did everything together. And if that works for some people, hey, more power to you. It just didn't work for me, and it didn't work in that relationship. And so I can remember that the second that we started talking about it, it was like, I mean, he left within like 10 minutes. And I was like, I don't know him anymore. I can remember he called me later that night and he was like, and he was in tears and he was like, can you book a hotel for me? Because you've always done all the booking of the hotels and taking care of all the financial pieces, and I don't know how to do that. And I can remember he was just like scared, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. What hotel do you want to stay in? I'll book you a hotel room. I'll do all that kind of stuff, because he didn't want to come back to the hotel room. But it was weird. It was like in that moment, like we didn't know each other anymore. We weren't in each other's lives, you know? And so not only did I lose a boyfriend, but I lost a best friend in that moment. And I think that's been the most painful thing of going through breakups. But that's not a reason to stay in a relationship. And I can remember at the time being like, I want something more. There has to be something more. I want to look across the table at somebody that I'm eating dinner with and be like, I cannot wait to get home and, you know, like be intimate, or I can't wait to get home and put our pajamas on and watch a movie. But I just like, you know, or still like, I mean, 16 years later, my husband walks across the room and while he's getting ready in the morning, I'm still like, damn, that man's attractive, you know, or that passion's still there, or that, you know, just like that ride or die feeling, not just as a best friend, but as like a partner in life, you know, that you just like, that you love and you lust after. I think that's a very important part of romantic relationships, you know? I think when you start making excuses about not wanting to be intimate with your partner anymore, or why it's not important to you, or we're kind of past that stage, or no, it's not important. You know, I have friends of mine that are in their 70s that still have a very active, intimate life. I think it's important. I think it's really important. I've been at the point in relationships where I've made excuses in my past relationships for why it wasn't important anymore. And in retrospect, I know what I was doing. I was making excuses because it was non-existent. And I didn't really want to, and neither did they. And so I just made excuses for why we didn't need to have it in the relationship, because I just wanted to hold on to the relationship for any reason. Well, I got out of the relationship, you know, my last one, and I was single for, you know, almost a year. And what I realized was that I learned who I was again. That taking that time off and learning who I was and learning what was important to me and all that kind of stuff. And then getting together with Alex, and that relationship was never easy, not from the beginning, you know, and then we ended our marriage counseling, and then it's taken, you know, 13 years, I think we're at 16 years now, but I think it was 12 or 13 years where we truly started to understand each other, you know? And I think with understanding each other and speaking a similar language comes respect and comes honesty. And I think that also with that, you know, comes intimacy. I've talked in many of my videos about the 12 points of intimacy, and intimacy is not just about sex. Intimacy is also about, you know, are you connected on this level? Are you talking about finances together? Or are you hiding things? Because talking about finances openly and honestly is a point of intimacy in a relationship. I think it's why so many people are scared to leave, because they don't have these connections of intimacy. Family relationships. Do you guys go and do things with each other's families? You know? Friend relationship. Do you guys do things with each other as friends and hang out with each other as friends? Do you have recreational intimacy? Do you have spiritual intimacy? My husband's an atheist. I'm a very spiritual person. We talk about our spiritual beliefs together. Doesn't mean that you have to be the same. It means that you're having conversations about those. You're allowing each other in. You're being vulnerable enough to have those conversations, you know? I think that, you know, my husband and I were just talking about this the other day in reference to some people that we know that are having tough times in their marriages right now. And I can remember my husband coming to me. It was my husband, and he said, you know, we're either going to go to therapy or we're going to get divorced. And the fear of him leaving and me not being with him anymore was more terrifying to me than going to therapy and what might come out of that. When we went to therapy, and it was actually Alex's idea, was he said, we're going to give this everything that we can give it for a year. And at the end of the year, we decide that we've given this everything we can, and it's just, we're not in love with each other anymore, because we were still in love with each other, but we just weren't doing the work. And at the end of the year, if we were like, we just felt the same way that we felt when we entered therapy, then there was no reason to stay together. We had given it a year. I mean, I know people that have given it 20 years, and it's like, at some point, you know, I remember asking my dad, years after my mom and my dad separated and got divorced, I said something about why did it happen, and he said, I wasn't in love with your mom and your mom wasn't in love with me. And he said, and I knew that she was never going to leave and that one of us deserved to be happy. And if I left, I would be happy, even though it would make me sad to do that. But by leaving, I thought your mom would be happy too, because it would give her independence. She didn't want to be with me anymore, but she wasn't going to leave because she believed in the sanctity of marriage. She believed in her marriage vows, and she would never have left. She told me that. She told me that her entire life. I never would have left her father. I would have stayed in a very unhealthy, unhappy marriage just because I believed in that. And she's, in retrospect, and later in her life, she said, and I don't know that I think that that's necessarily the right thing. You know, she said, I wouldn't have been happy with your dad, and your dad wouldn't have been happy with me. So, you know, I think I had to learn that I was going to be okay. One of the best things that came out of marriage counseling, I've talked about this a lot. One of the best things that came out of marriage counseling was at the beginning when I was having an individual session with a therapist then. We have a different therapist now. And he said to me, what will you be okay if you and Alex don't make it? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, it will be horrible. Like, I can't make it through that. There's no way I'll make it through that. I mean, this went on for like 10 or 20 minutes of this conversation. Will you be okay? No, I won't be okay. I'll be, you know, whatever. And then finally he said, but eventually you'll be okay. And I think I finally got it. It clicked. I was like, I mean, eventually I'll be okay. Yeah, eventually. He's like, you'll be able to pay your bills. Yeah, I'll be able to pay my bills. You'll find a place to live. Yeah, I mean, well, eventually I'll be okay. I don't want to, but eventually I'll be okay. And then he said, so it's not that you need or depend, codependency, it's not that you need or depend on Alex, it's that you choose to be with Alex. And I was like, oh, right. And he goes, and he chooses to be with you. And I was like, yeah. And he said, isn't it more powerful to you that you choose to be with somebody than you depend or need to be with somebody? And I was like, I mean, that was an aha moment for me. I mean, I woke up in that moment. Because I want to be with people that choose me to be in their life. I don't want to be with people because I depend on them or I need them or I don't know who I am without them. I know who I am today, standing on my own 2 feet with not one person around me. I know who I am. I've been there. And I can do it again. I prefer to have people around me. I want to have people around me. But I want to have people that choose me. And I want to choose people in my life as well. I don't want to be in unhealthy situations, unhealthy relationships. You know, whether that's with a friend or a romantic partner. I don't want to be in that unhealthy relationship if I'm not happy and it's not serving me. What's the point of me staying? For what? You know? And I think those are the questions that you have to ask yourself. And I will say this, if you're at the point where this video is resonating with you and you're asking yourself some of those questions, please get yourself into counseling right away. Go seek out a professional. This is not something that you might be able to figure out on your own necessarily. You should be running this by somebody. And people ask me all the time, like my husband or my wife won't go to couples counseling with me. What should I do? Go by yourself. Go by yourself, because you going alone is better than not going at all. Maybe they'll eventually come, or maybe they won't go at all. And maybe they're not going at all as a sign to you that they're not willing to put any work into the relationship. And then that's a further decision that you're going to have to make. I would never tell somebody to leave or stay in a relationship. That's not my decision. That's not my choice. I'm not in that relationship. I don't know the conditions of that relationship. But make sure that you have all the pieces before you make those decisions, you know? I don't know. I think one of the things I know today is that life is short. I've known that for a long time, but in the last couple of years, it's been thrown right in my face. I'm not going to stay in unhealthy relationships, whether they're friendships or relationships with my neighbors or whoever. I'm not staying in unhealthy relationships today. I'm not staying where I don't want to be, and I'm not staying where I'm not wanted. You know, I'm gonna be places that make me happy today. If I have the choice to be there, I'm not talking about if you're kept in a situation you can't get out of. That's a completely different situation. That's scary, and please seek professional help. I'm talking about if I have the choice of where I stay and where I go in this world today, I'm going to choose to be in places that make me happy, because life is short, and so should you. I love you guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.